This is part of our Meet the Expert series. Please introduce yourself and let us know a little about your background and the work you are currently involved in.
My name's Ian Robinson. I'm an IBM Distinguished Engineer. I've been in IBM for about 21 years now, most of that in the Hursley Development Lab. My current role is Chief Architect of the WebSphere Foundation, which includes the WebSphere application server. I started out in CICS development. I moved on to a few other projects which didn't see the light of day after that, so don't lose heart if you're involved in something that isn't always successful. I guess when things really started to take off for me, I was working on the component broker server, which was our Corba application runtime before Java EE came along and became successful and popular, where I was responsible for the transaction processing capabilities of that environment. That evolved into transaction processing capabilities of WebSphere itself, which is used throughout the stack. I've spent time being responsible for new programming models, and now I have a role as the overall chief architect.
Could you please talk about the key strategy for the WebSphere application server going forward and what is in store for the developer community?
So, the developer community is quite a significantly important part of the strategy going forward. If you look back over the history of the app server, we have had, I would say in the very early days, there was a focus on the developer, in as much as Java EE was new, web technologies were new, and so providing an environment in which new e-business applications could deliver important business systems through the new channels that the web provided. That was a lot about the developer. But then, as the WebSphere Foundation technologies matured over time, I think we probably switched our focus for a large number of releases towards the operational side of things. So, how do applications scale up? How do they scale out? How do they become highly available? How do you balance work in a dynamically changing environment? How do you provide business agility? The pendulum is now swinging back again towards the developers, and part of the reason for that is because we've been extremely successful on the operational side of the application server. So we compete against our high-end competition pretty well. Where we're seeing a lot of challenges, certainly over the last few years, is erosion from the more commodity end of the spectrum. So the Tomcats of this world, the JBosses of this world, are perceived, certainly by our customers' developer communities, they're perceived as being much more agile and flexible environments to develop in, even if the applications that are being developed are ultimately going to be deployed to a WebSphere production environment. So a pattern that we see repeated over and over again is developers developing against Tomcat, and then during integration testing, those applications have to be merged or migrated over in such a way that they'll run well in a WebSphere environment. Obviously, what we'd really like to be able to do is for our customers' developers to want to develop those applications on WebSphere in the first place, so that you have complete fidelity between the development environment and the production environment. And so the strategy going forward for WebSphere version 8, which is the version of the application server that will ship in 2012, is to make it extremely developer friendly, so that we then have the complete spectrum of use cases for WAS, from developing small lightweight applications in an agile fashion right up to deploying business critical, large scale, highly available applications using ND and WAS for ZOS. And so in version 8.5, probably the two biggest things you'll see that are different from what we've had before are the availability of the rational tools as plugins that you can add to an Eclipse environment, so that you've got a smaller, lighter weight development environment if that's what you need. But over and above that, the addition to the WebSphere application server of the lightweight composable Liberty profile, which is the runtime that the applications execute against, both in the development environment and potentially in the production environment as well, that enables us to deliver a footprint of WAS that's tailored to the application, so that, you know, if you only need servlets and JSPs, then only the servlet and JSP part of the web container and any qualities of service like security and transactions and so on will be brought up with the application. So we can start an application server instance up on that profile in 3 or 4 seconds. The runtime footprint is only about 50 megabytes rather than a full profile application server, which is closer to 300, 400 or 500. So it's delivering an experience which is more Tomcat-like for applications that only need a Tomcat-like profile of the application server. And the configuration experience in the developer environment is dramatically simplified, so that you can think about configuration with a developer hat on rather than a production hat on. I mean, in WebSphere today, when you configure a runtime, even in the development environment, you've still got to configure it. For example, if your application needs data sources, you've still got to configure it pretty much the same way you would do in an operational environment. WebSphere 8.5 through the Liberty profile is aimed exclusively at developers in the development environment, and also and provides a way for IT operations staff to manage it in the operational environment. So it provides a better division of responsibilities that appeals really to both parts of the community.
Key considerations for the developer community in WAS are challenges around complexity, extensibility and maintenance. Could you please let us know how WAS version 8 addresses these challenges?
So, I'll go back further than WebSphere version 8. If you go back to WebSphere version 7, and even beyond that, we've seen for a long time now that certainly our bigger customers tend to have large suites of enterprise applications. Those large suites of enterprise applications often contain third-party framework libraries in them. So, web frameworks or dependency injection frameworks, persistence frameworks, and so on. These frameworks are common across lots of different applications and tend to be delivered as libraries within each application. So you imagine you've got 100 applications in your suite. Those 100 applications might be delivered as 100 different ears. Those 100 different ears may all have copies of those common libraries in them. The applications evolve over time, the libraries evolve over time. If the library needs to, if it's a persistence library, for example, if a new version of a persistence library is brought out, maybe it's got a critical security fix in it or something, then operationally that library has to be rolled out to all of the applications that need it. And so, as the number of applications scale up, the management complexity of the IT operations organization becomes exponentially more complex. So one of the things we introduced in version 7 through a feature pack was support for OSGI applications. With an OSGI application, you can put common modules into a single bundle module repository and deploy the enterprise applications simply with metadata that says the application needs that library. So you don't actually have to deliver the library with each of the 100 or however many enterprise applications you've got. You can have one copy of those libraries in one place in an OSGI bundle repository that's configured as part of a WebSphere application server cell, and the deployment system understands this bundle repository, and when applications deployed, those common libraries that the applications need are deployed from the bundle repository with that application. So not only do you have a single place to manage those common modules. You also have the capability to manage multiple versions of those common modules. So if, in the example I gave earlier on, the persistence library needs to be updated from version 1.0 to version 1.1, you can have both of those versions available side by side in the common bundle repository, and then you can choose to update, a subset of the applications that need that version 1.1, the version 1.1 edition of that module library at the rate and pace at which you can afford to test those applications, rather than have to do all 100 of them at the same time. The thing that we've specifically added in version 8, over and above what we had when we introduced the feature pack in version 7, is that from a systems administration perspective in WebSphere today, it's possible through the admin console or WS admin scripting to dynamically update those modules in an application, not only without having to restart the application server, but in many cases we can update those applications in place without even needing to restart the application. So that's a significant part of the means through which we address management complexity in WebSphere version 8.
Any advice for the young developers who aspire to pursue their career in WAS?
Yeah, yes. Where do I start? So I think when I look back at how I started out in IBM, and everybody is different. I think the things that I thought were important, and probably the way in which I chose to conduct myself, were to bring lots of energy to work, to think about new and different ways of doing things, rather than just assuming that the way you're doing things at the moment is the most efficient way to do things. I mean, you can have 100 great ideas. It's like taking photographs. You can have, it's like taking photographs before you had digital cameras. You can take hundreds and hundreds of photographs, only a few of them are ever going to be any good, and you throw the rest away. Ideas are like that. So have lots of ideas, but don't expect everybody to think they're all great. If just one or two of your ideas work, then you've made a difference. Build networks. You cannot possibly know or do anything all on your own. The reason I'm sitting here talking to you as an IBM Distinguished Engineer today is because I made connections, friends in many cases, with people right across the corporation, with people in other companies through standards meetings, standards engagements that I worked in, through our customers. Get to know as many people as you can, understand what it is that they do. If they ask you for help, give it. If you can afford to give people your time and assistance, do it as freely as you can, because one day you might need to ask them for something in return, and they'll remember that. So, building a network of people that you like and that you can build trust with, and that they in turn can like and build trust with you, is, I can't overemphasize how important that is. Thank you. Thanks for your time.